All right. Welcome to Troubleshooting. Garland, this is episode number
6.
Number 6.
Yeah.
Right. After this, we have 2 more to go.
Right.
Then we're done with season 1. We want to thank everybody who has supported us. I want to thank everybody who has messaged us, just saying how this podcast has helped them, because that was the purpose of us doing it. You know, just to sit down and just help people. That's our only desire, is to help people. And once again, we are just troubleshooting and just working some things out.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
Garland, I have a topic today. You know, for many years, we worked with teenagers and we worked with young people. And we still do. So, but one thing that I always hear people say is, what's my purpose in life? Like, why am I here? What was I called to do? And I think a lot of times people struggle with identifying what that purpose is. Like, and it can be frustrating when you don't really know and you're just walking around or you choose not to do anything. But I want to encourage everybody at the sound of my voice is that no matter what background you come from, no matter what has ever been spoken over you, that you have a purpose inside of you. God created you for a reason. You're not here by accident. You are here because you have something great inside of you. Garland, what do you think about that?
I think it's really important to figure out what your purpose is, because a lot of times you'll be walking around in confusion. And I think it's healthy to have a desire to know what God created you to do. But if you're not clear on it, don't use that as an excuse to do nothing.
Right.
Because there are basic fundamental things that we know that we should be doing. So do what you know that you're supposed to do until you figure out what you're created to do. That's what I believe.
Exactly. And I was listening to Dr. Miles Monroe. I love Dr. Miles Monroe. I think he was one of the best speakers. I don't know if that's the word, but just of all times.
Yeah.
I mean, prolific, God rest his soul. But he said something that really stood out to me, Garland. He said that the cemetery is the richest place on earth. And at first when he said that, I was like, what does this man mean? And what he was saying was that so many of us die without fulfilling our full purpose and destiny. And because you know why? It's up to us.
Yeah.
God gives us choices. It's up to us to go out there and discover that. And I was just like, wow, wasn't that deep?
Yeah, that's deep.
That is so deep.
That's deep. And you can spend your whole life walking in fear. And sometimes your purpose could be tied to that step of faith that you're supposed to take that you're too afraid to take. And you keep putting off. And what he said about the cemetery being the richest place, because a lot of people don't actually activate the vision that God gave them. It's like they just stay stagnant, and you have to put things in place and you have to move out and step out on faith.
Right. So today, just briefly, we're going to talk about 3 things. Remember, you guys, this is just things that we're troubleshooting, and we just want to drop some nuggets. I want to first talk about knowing what something is, like we were just talking about earlier, is your passion. What are you passionate about? I think, what are you really passionate about? I know for me in my life, there are certain things that I am passionate about, but there are also certain things that I'm good at. Just because you're good at something, that doesn't always mean that that's what you're passionate about. You just happen to be good at. But what are you passionate about? Garland, like, elaborate on that, because before this, you said something really profound that I want you to say again about passion.
Well, I don't remember what I said, but I'll start talking and then tell me if I hit it.
Oh.
But what you just said just now about being good at something, it's not necessarily your purpose, because I could take this microphone and use it to hold the door open. It'll be good at doing that. I could wedge it in there and it'll do it just fine, but that's not what it's created to do. So that's an example of being good at something, but not what you're designing your purpose is. To have a passion for something is that when you see it and it's not the way it should be, that it bothers you more than you probably think that it should. Like, why is this, making me so upset? Why am I so upset when I see such and such happening or this happening or that happening? That means that could be what your purpose is tied to, because whenever you operate in your purpose, you begin to make money too.
Come on now.
And you make money by problems you solve.
Mm-hmm.
So if your purpose is to solve problems, the ones that you have passion for to solve, not only is that going to be your purpose, but that's what's going to be your increase too. And that's why when you operate in your purpose, you're doing things, you're actually working because you're solving problems, but it doesn't feel like work because you're operating in your purpose. So that's how you really know that you're operating in your purpose, because when you do it, it doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't feel like labor. It doesn't feel tiresome. It actually gives you energy to do it, and you get more energy every time that you apply more pressure and solve more problems.
That's good. And also, would you say that also too, for like your passion, that it is sometimes easy? Like, I know for me, discovering like a passion that I have is that I'm an encourager, but it comes so easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody has to hype me up to be an encourager.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if somebody is doing something, whether good or bad, I'm going to be like the biggest cheerleader. I'm going to be there encouraging you, and telling you who you are. And I always tell people, when you come into my space, you're going to come out better, because I'm passionate about making people feel good about who they are. Because so many people in life have been told who they are not. You need to be told who you are, of course, in God. But I'm very passionate about that. So do you think sometimes what you're passionate about can come easier? It just comes natural.
Yeah. When things that come easy for you may not be as easy for others. And that's a good example of encouragement, because that doesn't come naturally for a lot of people. And the caveat is that sometimes you'll look at somebody that's not a natural encourager and look at them a certain type of way. But what we have to understand is that may not necessarily be their gift to do that. And that's okay, because that's not, part of what they were created to do. Now, you can train yourself to do it, and you can, be purposeful and mindful to do it. It may not come naturally, but that still doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. We all should encourage everybody. But when you talk about purposes and gifts and talents and all of that, those are the things that come to us more easily than it does for others.
Right.
And it doesn't make us better or less than others. It just means that that's our particular gift that we have.
That's good. Another thing discovering your purpose is really discovering what you're kind of passionate about.
Yes.
And I think number 2, because I asked our oldest son, DJ, who actually helps put these podcasts together. So, but I was asking him, like, what is something in his generation that he would really want to know about discovering the purpose? And he was talking about consistency. Once you know your passion, and is being consistent and walking in that. And I think now is so many things that can get you inconsistent, because we have more distractions, we have more things to do, but to actually be consistent in that, I think is really saying that this is something that I want to do, and I'm going to be consistent, and I'm not going to look for approval from people, because I think now a lot of times we're always looking for approval from people. We're looking for approval from people when we post something. We're looking for approval from people when we do anything. How many likes, or how many followers, or how many of this? That means that people like me. That means people do this. So sometimes if we feel like we don't get that approval, we kind of second guess ourselves and say, is this what I'm supposed to do?
Yeah.
And we have to be careful. And when you know, you know.
Yeah.
And when you know that then you should be consistent in what you walk in.
Yeah. If consistency is like a vehicle or a car, you can't use validation to be your gas. You can't depend on people to fill it up for it to keep moving. You got to keep moving on your own. And I heard a preacher say one time that we have a tendency to live between that space between the claps. When people clap for you, and you live your whole life in that little space, and you think that you're only as good as that space. So if they're not clapping, you're not doing good. If they're not clapping, you're not validated, and it makes you want to give up, because that's your basis, that's your fuel, that's your gasoline, that's what gets you going and fills you up. So you have to get to the place where you don't have to have anybody patting you on the back and be consistent anyway, because you can get motivated. Just like at the beginning of the year, everybody's in the gym, they bringing new equipment in to the gym.
Oh yes, I know about
and
that.
And they always say we're gonna take it out in a couple of weeks because everybody's gonna be dropping off anyway. But you can have that short term blast of energy, but it means nothing, because unless you finish the race, consistency is what does it. Long term intensity will beat short term intensity. Somebody said that one time.
Say that again. What you said?
Long term consistency will beat short term intensity. So you can have an intense moment in the short term where I'm going to do boom, boom, boom for maybe a couple weeks. But if you overwhelm yourself trying to do too much at one time, in that analogy, then you have to slow it down and say, maybe instead of trying to do this every single day for the rest of my life, maybe do it 3 times a week and get consistent with it. And then I can build from there. So consistency is the key to it. And you have to have your own motivation and encourage yourself, pat your own self on the back.
That's good. That is good. So discovering, what we supposed to do. Because I know it's a lot of people out there, you're stuck, and you get into that stuck phase and you don't do anything. But hopefully this is going to get you out of that stuck phase. So what are you passionate about? And when you discover what you're passionate about and be okay with that, then you are consistent and walking in it. And the last topic, really, Garland, is it's a mindset. Our thinking, how we think is so very important. So many times we hold on to words, and something that I love saying, someone had told me this, it's like, even when we think, our mind is either in 2 places, Garland. It's either in the guilt of the past or the anxiety of the future. When we're thinking about something, it's either in the guilt of the past or it's in the anxiety of the future. It takes a lot to be in the present moment and to just focus on that task. I think that's what made COVID, the season of COVID, such a unique season, because it caused us to stop and think about what we are doing, what is going on in our lives. And I think it takes a mindset to really believe and just stop and say, you know what? I'm not going to think about anything that was said or spoken over me years ago. I'm not going to get so anxious and think about the worst case scenario or what can happen, but I'm going to say, this is something that God created in me to do. So I'm going to do it and have that mindset to do it. What do you think about that?
I think it has a lot to do with perception, because your perception is your focus. You're focused on the past or you focus on the future. And when you really think about how many problems you could have 100 problems going on in your life at the same time. But if you got a bad doctor report that says you got 2 weeks to live, now you only got 1 problem. So it puts things in perspective. And I always deal with situations like that too, that if something tragic were to happen, would this even really matter? When it comes to worry and anxiety, if something tragic were to happen in my life right now, would this even matter? And if the answer is no, then that means it shouldn't affect me right now. Yeah, I may need to handle the situation. I may need to deal with it, but I don't have to worry about it and let it control me and my attitude. Because once I allow it to do that, now I become consumed and become a slave to whatever it is that I'm worried about. or whatever it is I'm feeling guilty about. First of all, guilt to the past, you can't do that because you what's done is done. You can't change that. You can't change what you did. But worrying about the future, you have to have the right perspective about it and realize that what I'm worried about doesn't even really matter. And if it doesn't matter based off of circumstances changing today, then it's not worth worrying about no matter what's happening today. I have to deal with it, but I'm not going to worry about it.
Right. And I think that also too, that's really good. I think also too, when it comes to the mindset, is what are we feeding our mind? You know, a lot of times what I noticed about mindset is that, believe it or not, you really have to be careful who you hang around. Yeah. Because you do turn into they always say you turn into the 5 people who you hang around the most. So if you're surrounding yourself with people who are negative, I mean, you're going to be negative. I mean, it is what it is. If you're surrounding yourself with people that's broke, and then probably, that's how it's going to be. But you have to be careful to surround yourself around people that have vision and that have goals, because that's going to also keep you on track when it comes to what you're thinking about. So those are things that we could do to feed our mind with, is being mindful of who we are surrounded with. Another thing, Garland, that I always love is that, when we always talk about even reading books, what they say, readers are leaders, reading books and feeding our mind on a daily basis. With us being pastors, of course, we feed our mind with the word of God and things like that. But it's also okay to get you like a book to learn more about yourself, and just to learn more about how to be consistent, how to have that winning mindset. I know one thing when I was building my business, this is a true story. I would listen to this motivational tape. I'm not going to say who the person is, and this person, they would get me on fire. I mean, they would be saying stuff and I'm like, yeah. And I remember, I don't know, was it Gabe or Isaiah? They were like, because I would listen to it in the car, so I could get like pumped up and everything. And I remember it was either Gabe or Isaiah. They were like, Mommy, they were like, are you okay? Are you depressed or something? And I'm like, no, not even a little bit. I'm just feeding my mind with something so encouraging. Like I love to listen to Les Brown. Les Brown get you fired up about stuff. Now those things don't take the place of reading the word or different things like that. It's just, what are we feeding our mind?
Yeah, it's a continuous thing. The reason why there's such a struggle with mindset is because a lot of the issues that we're dealing with are in our subconscious mind. And that's the hardest place to reach because it's not always active. So I was reading a book one time that's breaking it down that if you've ever been driving a car, those of us that drive, and you had a long drive, and then you get in the car, you start the car up, and then the next thing you know, you're at home. You don't remember anything about the hour and a half ride that you took. That's because your subconscious mind took over, and now you're just going through the motions. So people that have nervous twitches, like chewing the inside of their mouth or licking their lips too much, things like that, those are subconscious things. And how do you break that though? Because you don't even think about it when you're doing it. And the way you do it is you have to feed your mind constantly over and over and over until it gets into your subconscious. And once it gets into there, now the true change happens. That's why the Bible tells us to meditate on the word of God, because once it gets past our minds and gets into our subconscious, which is our hearts, then that's when true change begins to happen.
Yeah, I think that you are so right about that, is that, being mindful of that. And I do like when you talked about, how the Bible talks about that too as well. Is we have to be careful. I was even in one of my business trainings, that I was doing, they even said, you have to be careful just watching the news. Yeah. because before you know it, you'll be on edge about everything.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have so much fear inside of you
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we're feeding our mind with.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say don't watch the news so you're not, up to date with everything. But, like, especially like if you have, like, I always talk about this, like my mom, she will always, watch the news and she'll tell me, Farida, did you know this happened or did you know that happened? And I'll be like, no, Bob, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, old school generation, when you came in the house, they was watching two things, either the news or the soap operas.
Yeah. Yeah. And every morning they had a newspaper.
Every morning they had the newspaper. I remember my dad getting the thing off the newsstand, which is a great thing. But we also have to be careful of that too as well, because before we know it, we will be, because if you watch the news, just keep watching it, you will be so depressed.
Yeah.
You'll be scared to come out your house
Mm-hmm.
and everything, because that is what we are feeding our minds with.
Yeah. I mean, you do need to know what's going on.
Yes.
And you do need to watch the news, read the news, whatever, to find out, what's going on in our world and our economy. But what we're saying is that can't be your focus.
Yes.
You can't meditate on that day and night, because once you do that, that begins to build up a spirit of fear. And I'm not talking about the power of positive thinking or anything like that. But the Bible says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he.
Yes.
So if you want to change what's in your heart, you have to realize where the heart is. It's not talking about this beating in your chest. It's talking about your mind. And once you get God in your mind and love the Lord with your mind, and you be able to change your situation, you have to feed it. It's consistency. It's what we constantly feed. You don't eat one day a week. You eat all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
You have to feed yourself in order to grow. And what we feed our minds control our minds, and whatever controls our minds controls our feet, and we end up walking out whatever it is that we're putting in us.
That's good. That's good. So today, I hope that you got some nuggets today about, discovering really what God wants you to do or what you created for. Or I hope that you got motivated, because sometimes, you just have to get up. What are you passionate about? We talked about passion. Once you discover that, be consistent. Don't worry about what anybody else is saying. If God placed something in your heart, today is the day. Get up, do it, be consistent. And number 3, what are you feeding your mind with? What are you meditating on? What are you doing? Those 3 things are so, so important. Garland, anything else before we log off our podcast?
No, I mean, I really like the one about the mind.
Yes.
And that's the center of it. That's the placenta, the womb, whatever you want to say. That's where everything grows. And whether good or bad, if change comes, it has to start in your mind.
Yes.
We always say when we get ready to change something, we say, I made up in my mind that I'm going to do blank, blank, blank. You have to make up your mind. Make it up in your mind that you're going to do it, and then get consistent with it. Find your passion, and you'll be walking in your purpose. And that's when the money comes.
The money comes, right. The money comes. So listen, you guys, I hope that you were blessed. I hope that you got something out of this podcast today. Thank you to all your family and friends. This is my timer. Do you guys hear my timer going off? It's going off. I got like a little beat right here, so it's gonna keep going off until I turn this off. But listen, that timer lets me know when time is up. But listen, tell your family, tell your friends, go to our YouTube channel. Make sure that you watch this podcast, because we really want to help. And and a lot of times we share negative things, but these are positive nuggets that could help you along your life. So until next time, that's episode 6.
Yes.
Discovering your purpose. Yeah.
All right. God bless you all.
God bless y'all. Bye-bye.